Coffee with Caregivers production costs are covered by a partnership with UnitedHealthcare and the National Foster Parent Association. We receive no federal or state funding and depend on our constituents and viewers to help us achieve our goals to provide support and services that meet identified needs within our mission. We would like to welcome the viewers of Coffee with Caregivers to the family. The National Foster Parent Association offers several membership opportunities for individuals, child placing agencies, and state and local affiliates. You can join today or donate at nfpaonline.org.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Caregivers during this month of May and our celebration of National Foster Care Month. We've been highlighting folks this month who have been important in people's lives through foster care. And today our guest comes from a different angle because she was in foster care. And coincidentally, currently is employed by our Coffee with Caregivers national sponsor, UnitedHealthcare. So, Doctor, I hope I don't mess this too far up, but your first name is, you said Greek, right? And so, Arethusa?
You said it perfectly.
Oh my gosh, good, thanks. So Dr. Arethusa Kirk. And I just am so excited to have you on this morning so we can talk about you and your journey from entering foster care at age 4, being in and out of foster care, and actually then aging out of foster care. And so I know our viewers are going to be so interested in listening to you and learning about how those experiences hindered you or helped you or motivated you, whatever happened for you to become a pediatrician, and then for over 5 years being the National Senior Medical Director at UnitedHealthcare. What an amazing journey. So before we get started to talk about you, I always introduce a coffee cup and with my coffee in it. And this one I just got last week, actually, for Mother's Day, and it was at a Mother's Day tea where we live. We live in my husband and I we're old, and so we didn't want all the work with the big house that we had with no big family in it anymore. So we sold it to a granddaughter who wanted it and moved to a senior 55 plus community. And it's called Affinity at Wells Branch. But for Mother's Day, they had a wonderful Mother's Day tea with all the trimmings, and they gave us a cup. And so I've been using this cup for the last week because we really enjoy where we are. So that's my cup. And I know you have one too this morning, Dr. Kirk.
I do. Here's my cup. Hopefully you can see it. Love you to the moon and back. My story here is, this is a phrase that my children, I have 2 boys, use all the time with each other. And often will say, no, love you more. So
yeah,
I'll share that one with you.
That's a good one. So tell us about yourself. I'm so eager to learn more about you.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a pediatrician by training, and I've been in practice for many years and still work as a primary care pediatrician for one of the federally qualified health centers that I spent almost a decade in. I do that as a sort of a moonlighting and want to make sure that I continue to stay clinically active and stay connected with the population that I'm so privileged to serve on every day. So I became a pediatrician because I really wanted to give back. It's part of my desire to really pay it forward for all of the people that helped along the way. And it keeps me grounded as well, as I'm in this role at UnitedHealthcare, where I'm doing a lot of population health work and systems of care work. This really helps me stay grounded with the people that we're privileged to serve. So I'm here in Maryland, and I think you mentioned that I've So I've been with United for 5 years. My core role for the last most of that time has been with the state of Maryland, and I've been privileged to be their chief medical officer, and then most recently have moved into a more national role. So I have 2 children. They're 10 and 12. And so I think, sort of my other parallel, most important job is being a mom.
Right. Absolutely. So you don't need to get personal about why you had to go to foster care and things like that. But I think people would really be interested in understanding a little about your experiences while you were in foster care.
Sure. Well, I do think it's sometimes important to understand, because everybody comes into foster care for a variety of different reasons. And I do think it's important, as we're celebrating Foster Care Month, but also Mental Health Awareness Month, that, people struggle with different things. My mother, who's now up in heaven, she struggled with mental health issues. And so that was sort of an impetus that, made it difficult for her to be consistently there. And so I started in foster care at age 4 with at that time, I won't sort of age myself, but at that time, our systems of care allowed people to be hospitalized for long periods of time. And so my mother was in a hospital for quite some time. And so my first foster care placement was really almost about a year long, or at least that's my recollection of it. And that really created, an enormous amount of stability. And, I have some clear memories of that, of that wonderful time of the family really trying to kind of create stability for me. And they had, teenage kids, and, here was this little 4-year-old. So I'm sure it was challenging for them at the time. But, not like so many, I kind of went in and out of placement, because the goal the goal is to try and have family reunification. And certainly at that time, in which I was placed initially, we were evolving as a healthcare system and also as a social services system. And so, there, looking back on it, I can say that there were things that I would probably have, desired to have changed about the way that sort of came about. But at the same time, it also kind of made the resilient adult that I am. And so, I see all of it as part of the journey.
You talk about resiliency and how important that is, to everybody, but particularly to children and youth who have experienced traumatic trauma in some way in their life, and who certainly experience separation from their parents for periods of time. You want to kind of talk a little bit about resiliency and how you found that in yourself, or was it just there and it came out, or did you have to look for it?
Probably all of the above. Yeah, I mean, we focus a lot on talking about the things that differentiate children in foster care because of the trauma that they've experienced. And I do think that's important, because we really want to make sure we're putting wraparound services and supports around children to identify specifically that they are unique. They're a unique group of people, and they have unique needs. And we certainly know all the statistics that are, very sobering in terms of the rates of diagnosis of ADHD and depression and anxiety, as well as, high rates of diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the point of all of that data really is to say that early intervention behavioral health supports early are very, very important to help children work through those particular challenges and issues, and the fact that they have experienced trauma, right? The whole removal from a sort of familiar environment, no matter how traumatic that was, is different, is its own set of challenges and change. And so kids at different developmental stages also need different supports depending on where they're at. So we know this also in terms of just early childhood development, that the science is very clear that the earlier we can identify kind of a dissociation or aberration from the quote normal stream of development, the earlier we can identify it, put supports in place to help with that, the better the outcome, no matter what the child and their potential. And the goal for pediatric care is prevention, and is allowing each child to reach their particular potential. And the other thing that I think is really important to understand is that none of us has a crystal ball to what that is. We don't know what people's potential is. And I do think that, to your point about sort of, was that resilience, did I have to find it, or was it in me? Or, I have a personal viewpoint that we carry within each of us our own set of limitless tools. And so part of it is, yes, finding it, but also having other people be able to show the way and give clues, when there were particularly tough times and it was difficult to see it for myself.
Right. We talked a little earlier off camera about a conversation I'd had with some folks last week regarding the ACEs. And when we were in a discussion about complex trauma, complex PTSD, some of those kind of things that we're seeing, and talking about that, we have to figure out how we can ensure that kids who have a score in the ACEs, we probably all would have some kind of a score. We've all had some things that probably are considered on the ACEs checklist, but that the score is one part of who these kids are, and it shouldn't be who they are. And when we were fostering, there wasn't an ACEs out there yet. We fostered from 1974 to 2002. And what we would be given oftentimes to look at is when we're considering a child joining our family, if there was time, would be a psychological evaluation where they'd write a summary, right? And I learned early on, especially when we started taking teenagers the last 10 years that we fostered, is I would tell them, I don't want to read that. And the caseworkers were like, what are you talking about? You've got to know. And I said, no, that summary I've learned the hard way goes back. If this is a 15-year-old you want me to have join my family, and they've been in care since they were 3, it lists every single thing they ever did wrong through that whole time. And that's not who a 15-year-old is. They're different than they were when they were 3 or 6 or 9 or 12. And I don't want that clouding my discernment of what I'm going to observe in this youngster. And so I really don't want to know. And so when these youngsters would come, we'd say to them, we'd love to learn a whole lot about you. When you're ready to talk to us about, who you are, we'd love to know it. And I said, because we don't look at the psychological evaluations, and we don't pay much attention to what people have told us that you've done in your past, because that's in the past and you're who you are today. We want to get to know who you are today and where you want to go tomorrow and in the future. And, we had really good results with that because we didn't use the negatives as a way to get to know the child.
Yeah.
So, as we look at the ACEs, it's kind of an easy target to say, oh, this kid's got 6 on the ACEs checklist. Oh my God, that sort of thing. Do you have any thoughts about, how we use that information to help us do right by the child and figure out what kind of supports and services they need? But for foster families who are, incorporating these kids into their lives 24/7 and with other children in the home, usually, how we understand that information, that it's information from the past, but how we can use that to build on the future and through the resiliency and help these kids understand the resiliency that's already built in, but they just need to know they have a bright future ahead of them if they want to work for it or, search for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. The ACEs, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences, was built out of a project of research and a body of research that really focused on the fact that there are adult disease states and chronic disease states that have a higher propensity for occurrence with those that have had significant adverse childhood experiences. And so, really what it does is draw a line between the types of experiences we experience as children and a potential corollary to adult chronic disease. But it also gives us a sense of kind of scoring particular experiences in childhood and understand the traumatic nature of them. At the same time, I don't think that those scores really, our personal view is those scores don't need to be defining. They're really just, as any other screening tool, a way to understand risk and to understand, potential barriers that we need to address. And to my point earlier, that the earlier we can intervene, the better. But even if we didn't get to intervene early, that doesn't mean that there's a foregone conclusion either. So, right. More to the point, I think your approach of really framing the narrative that the whole world's wide open for you. Geez, you're a child. There's many, many years ahead of you, decades ahead of you for transformation and change, and whatever's occurred in the past certainly is part of it is your history, it's your story, and nobody's going to try and whitewash that. At the same time, how you move forward in your future is really yours, and we're here to support you and help guide you in how we can, and for you to be able to tell your story and your history, especially for teenagers, as they really are trying developmentally, they're really grappling with who they are, what defines them, what does family mean, what does family mean for my future, all those kinds of historical facts about themselves then become, either the narrative they carry forward or something that they have the understanding and ability to shape.
Right.
So, to me, I think what's important is that the ACEs are a way of marking a particular amount of adverse childhood experiences. But, even if you had a low score or a high score, the point here is that there has been an adverse childhood experience, and that it's important to understand it and address it. And provide the supports so that really what we're trying to do is prevent chronic disease, long-term results, and help people become the greatest, version of themselves that they can.
Right. I have a colleague that has done some work with the ACEs, looking at it from the developmental levels for children to see if you can. Just working on a project to try to see if we can get this a pilot going. That if when certain types of trauma affect the child at that developmental stage, and they get stuck there, like we know kids do, how can if we learn more about that we can better address that through certainly various types of therapy, but also through parenting style, ways of meeting that child's needs on a more developmental level than a chronological age level, which we all tend to see the child, and we think that that's where they're functioning in all areas. And our observations have been that some kids are functioning at chronological age level in some areas, but not in others of development. And they are attached to when some really traumatic incident happened to them, and they kind of got stuck there. And that's why the child kind of seems like a puzzle, right? Can't quite figure out why they respond appropriately with this, but not to that, that kind of thing. So I think there's some really good work that continues to go on to help us better utilize and define the ACEs, not just the scores, but where the trauma was. And I agree with you 100%. We have to know what happened, but we can't let that be kind of the driver of how we interact with the kids. We always just said we're going to start fresh. We're on page 1 of a book that we don't know how many pages it's going to have, but let's write this book in a way that you want it to be written.
It's so inspiring to hear that from you, because that's exactly what kids need, right? We all know this, that they need to be seen, heard, listened to, feel a sense of belonging. And this isn't just for kids that are, in preschool age. Frankly, every child needs that, and adults do too. So we all need to feel like we've been, that we're truly being seen for who we are and who we decide that we are as well.
Right. Yeah, there's a quote that I found one time that didn't have just an author unknown, but it said they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yes,
and
quote before.
Yeah, and I just think it's a great quote. You can tell somebody something over and over and over because you're an expert, but if they don't think you care about them first, they're really going to not pay attention to that, right? And I think that for kids that that are in care, whether it be formal foster care, informal, we've got lots and lots of children who live with relatives that are not part of a child protection system at all, but are there because for some reason they can't be with their families. We all need to know that whoever is going to be that constant for us truly cares about us. And I guess one of my questions to you was, when you were in care in those various foster families that you lived with, did you feel like they really cared about you? Or did you feel like, well, it's more of a 3 hots in a cot feeling? Because I've had kids tell me that, no, they didn't care. It's like 3 hots in a cot, that's all they had to do. They didn't just feed me and give me a place to sleep. They really didn't have to invest in me.
Yeah.
Did you feel that at some point?
I feel really fortunate. I don't recall feeling that way.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That I was in. So, my last family, I've stayed. They're my family. So, I kind of had a rare situation where I got to really choose where I choose the last couple places where I stayed, and they, essentially applied to become foster parents uniquely just to take care of me. So, I had, I think, a unique set of circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
but the shortest stay that I had was just 1 day. One of them was just an overnight or however long it was, to a series of placements that were just 3 months long. And that, at least this is how how I remember it, was, or the way I was told the explanation was that there was a court hearing and process that was being prolonged. And so each one of the placements was essentially with a short-term stay, and they kind of reached their 90-day limit and had to, in my case, wasn't resolved. And so then I had to be moved to a different home. And I have to say, my recollection of each one of those moves was particularly traumatic, because I became very, very close with each of these families. And, I'm sure it was very hard for them as foster parents as well. In fact, I know it was. So, those types of experiences kind of stick with you, because you become attached to people, and then you have to, that particular year I moved, whole different counties and school districts and so on. At the same time, the sort of story I tell that I think is important for all kids that have gone through foster care, and also the foster families that care for them, that also enter into this, dialectical bargain, or this shared bargain of really investing in each other and then having to let go, is that, change really becomes our superpower. we love hard, and at the same time, we give freely and willingly, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the fact that we're willing to care that deeply for each other is an important story to tell.
Absolutely.
For kids that have grown up in that type of environment, it certainly had its challenges, but I think as an adult, I think it's really taught me is this incredible sense of being able to be flexible with very volatile situations, and has made me a much more resilient leader, clinician and parent.
I agree with you 100%. There's let's see if I can find it. I might actually have it in here. Yeah, I do. I had found this some time ago, years ago now, actually, and it was just a thing about fostering, and it was called PG. I've got it here. Parental guidance is provided. I drive to visits, to counseling, to doctor appointments. I buy clothes and toys. I watch dance recitals and soccer games. I conference with teachers. I tutor. I wipe dirty noses. I run the bath. I hear the prayers. I hug. I kiss. I rock. I scare away the boogeyman at night and the ones in the daytime too. Proudly, I watch them grow. Sadly, I watch them go. And though I may not be the real parent, I love to foster. That was another unknown person. But the how you talk about, how difficult it is when families get separated, whether it's the child from their birth family or the separation then from a foster family. And we always think about how and we should be thinking about how that is affecting the child, because it's another traumatic experience. But if they've been in a relationship with a foster family where they have truly felt like they belonged, they were loved, cherished, we know that those kinds of traumatic experiences can be dealt with, and we can move forward, because that's what attachment's all about, right? Successfully attaching is important the first time, and once we've done it once, we know we can do it again. Unfortunately, too many times, right? Kids in foster care have to do that way more often than anybody should. I've said this before on a coffee episode, but was talking with a foster mother of 30 years, and she said, Irene, I'm going to have my heart, something's going wrong with the heart, so I'm going to have some tests, and I'd like for you to pray for me. And I said, well, I certainly will. And she said, well, I think when they look at my heart, they're going to see just like a patchwork quilt, because it's been broken so many times and it's been patched up so many times, so I can keep on loving these kids that I don't know what they're going to find in there. And I just thought, that's how it is. We had 127 children join our family over 27 years, and I can't even imagine what my heart must look like. There were so many times where it was just bursting for joy for these kids because they were going home and it was good, and I was going to miss them like crazy, but I knew it was the right thing. And then there were times when I didn't think that way, and the heartbreak was so significant. And I will always remember this little girl. We'd had her 3 years. She was 5 years old. They picked her up to take her to Switzerland to live with grandparents she certainly never met, that they didn't even know she existed prior to like 3 months before. And the caseworker driving down our long country driveway, and her screaming, mama, 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 mama. And, there are times when I wonder how, as an adult, I was able to rebound from that and risk loving the next child that much. But that's what we do. But I did it as an adult with all my adult senses. And I think about the kids that are experiencing those extreme feelings, and they don't have the adult capabilities to figure it out like we do, and how that impacts them.
Yeah.
It's.
Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, you can tell I got teary-eyed too.
I do every time I talk about it because, oh my God,
it's difficult. I mean, I think the thing that I kind of take away is at least a grounding is that, our job as adults really is to be the ones that show the way. And so, you're right. They don't have the tools because they've never been through it before. And we don't want them to have to go through it. But, in the event that they do, which is exactly the space we're in here, we're talking about, children that this is their reality, is, just our job as adults is to be the ones that give that safe space and provide that support and, provide a pathway for understanding how to deal with really complex issues that, we all have our traumas, right? We all have our traumas no matter what they are. Life has its ups and downs. And, I think just sort of our role as adults is really to try to do the best we can to show those who haven't been there yet what they can do to stay strong. And, they teach us too. I mean, as you know, children teach us every day something new about ourselves. So it's a sort of bi-directional learning process as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our now 37-year-old daughter, she had a birthday last week, lives with us. She has Down syndrome. She was 5 months old when she joined our family. And I don't know what I'd do without her. I continue to learn from her every day. She continues to amaze us with her abilities, her skills, her joy. There's pure joy in everything she does. Just have a bad day. And, we've got people that live here in the complex with us now. They'll say, can I have a little bit of Melissa time? I'm having a bad day. And even though she can't speak very well and they don't understand what she's saying, she can just love on them completely, and they feel better. What we get through foster care, whether we're the caregiver or the child who experiences, ultimately must be positive, right? It has to be hope and peaceful existence and joy in our hearts. And I just wish that there was some way we could make sure that always happens.
We'll keep on trying. So
absolutely,
a goal itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know that you've been working on a really exciting project right quick because our time is getting short. So I'd love for you to talk to us about your UnitedHealthcare partnership with Sesame Street.
Yes. I mean, who could be more excited to talk about Sesame Street? I loved Sesame Street growing up. And, so we're excited. We've had 10 years of a partnership with Sesame Street Foundation. And they have a wonderful website for families. Particularly, they have a focus on foster children, but they have a focus on all kinds of early childhood experiences and real tools and toolkits for families to be able to download. But it's Sesame Street in the communities. And they have a little foster Muppet named Carly who's been in out-of-home placement. And they have, great materials to kind of guide in those conversations, especially that 0 to 6 age group. Those big questions and big emotions that children are dealing with at that developmental age, to kind of really help understand, how to address them. What I also found really interesting is that there's a video interaction between Carly and Elmo and Carly's foster family. But so part of this is also teaching other children who are in that same age group to understand and respect and have compassion for children that are different than them. So, Elmo sort of represents the friend of Carly. He's not in out-of-home placement, but he really wants to be a really good friend. And so I just think there's wonderful educational possibilities and materials for foster families, for foster children, but also for other children who want to be, compassionate friends to their classmates and other friends in their
Right. That's what I'm hoping too, is that for kids that are viewing that as they're, growing up when they start to school, and that they will have a better understanding of what foster care means.
Yeah.
And when they have a classmate that they find out's in foster care, or has been in foster care, that there'll be a bit of compassion there that they've learned about through what they've watched on Sesame Street. So that's just such a exciting thing. And I know we hear positive comments about the character and the lessons that they're trying to instill in their viewers. So it's exciting to know that United has a relationship already. So that is just outstanding. Outstanding.
I couldn't be prouder. I mean, as you know, Sesame Street's been at the vanguard of diverse and inclusive programming for a long time. So there's a lot of other resources that particularly deal with, prescient conversations that we're having, particularly around race and diversity and inclusion. And so I would encourage all families to kind of look at their resources, but particularly around, foster care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Kirk, I hate to tell you this, but our time is up. Darn, I hate that when these are over. But our audience is busy too. And so asking them to sit much longer to watch our show is kind of hard these days. Is there any final message you'd like to share with our audience before we go?
Well, probably two things. I would just say that I'm really proud to be part of the UnitedHealthcare family. Their mission is to help people live healthier lives. So we couldn't be prouder to support the National Foster Parent Association and your programming. But also, I think my life story, the reason I want to tell it and feel comfortable telling it, even though, it is personal, is that I really hope that it's inspirational to someone. And my goal is to really try and pay it forward. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm going to close with another quote that I heard. I guess you can tell I like quotes. I save them because I need inspiration sometimes. And so I'll go back and just read through some of them. But just heard this one this last week. And I don't even know the last name of the young woman who said it, but her name was Natalia. It was during a Bridge Meadows virtual event that I was watching. And she says, when we're connected, we belong. When we are connected, we are strong. And I think, it's just a simple statement, but it's so true. And I think it's why sharing about ourselves, our experiences can help other people. And this is one avenue that the National Foster Parent Association has selected to try to do that and to be more active in people's daily lives as they go about their work of fostering or working within the foster care system. So again, thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to spend it with me and with all of our viewers. And so I just want to remind our viewers that our episodes of Coffee with Caregivers are archived on our main website. They're also on our YouTube channel and certainly, on the Facebook page. So go back and watch other episodes if you've missed some, and hopefully some of them will speak to your heart as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Kirk.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to all the foster parents.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, bye.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with our friends at UnitedHealthcare. For more information about UnitedHealthcare, please visit www.uhc.com.